Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. The only item I wanted to follow up on was information I had provided to the council earlier, responding to a request from a resident about ranked choice voting and the mechanics of how RCV would work and if it was going to be detailed before the general election balloting process. And as I laid out in the information to council, I think it's also good to share with the community that the process for crafting the ordinance, the timeline to do that would not be achievable before voting is to begin for the general election. Early voting begins 45 days before the November 3rd election day, which means that September 18th is the day that election or that early voting will begin. And it just isn't possible to work through the process of getting the council to respond to the various policy issues and then to craft that into an ordinance language for consideration, go through the public hearing process with notification and all of that. And that's not even mentioning that we're in the midst of election preparation right now, and we really need the expertise of our election staff to help guide this. So I wanted to make sure that we responded out loud, though, so that community members understand that the process once the election is done, if the ballot initiative determines the community wishes to utilize ranked choice voting, the next step is that we would immediately begin the work to craft the ordinances that deal or detail the process for ranked choice voting here in Bloomington, because it doesn't necessarily have to be the same as it is in other communities. And we can still do that very early in 2021 with more than enough lead time before the election to have those details in place. The mechanics, I don't think necessarily are going to define where people land on whether ranked choice voting is the process that they think that we should be using or not. And I see that our assistant city manager's making eye contact here, so I think that she probably wants to weigh in on this a little bit too.
Mr. Manager, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to add that the adoption of our administration procedures should the ballot question pass would be done by ordinance, and therefore there would be a public hearing on that ordinance. So an opportunity in early 2021 for any resident who desired to weigh in on the administrative detail that needs to be decided in order to carry it out. So there would be a public input process even after the ballot question.
Very good. And I would even say if the mechanics or the administrative detail of ranked choice voting do influence your decision whether or not to support or not support ranked choice voting, I think that's entirely up to you. And if that's one of the things that goes into your decision whether or not to support it or not support it, that's perfectly understandable. So, but that's the kind of the reality of where we are in terms of timing, in terms of staffing, in terms of how this is all kind of playing out, and understand people's desire to have all the specifics and all the details, but unfortunately we're not going to be able to have that because we do need the time to put it together, and ultimately we'll have a public hearing on it anyway, one way or the other. So, anything else, Mr. Verbrugge?